Regeneration and Sustainable Development Scrutiny Committee on this little bit wet and windy Friday morning, the 11th of March 2022. Just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can I also welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not speak or participate? Can I please remind you all to switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting, please? Can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings also, which have been previously circulated? Namely, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand? I will assume that you've all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you are referring to? And I will now take you to the first item on the agenda, which is to do the roll call. I'm Councillor Steve Hunt, the chair, and I am here this morning. I will now call on Chloe, the Democratic Services Officer, to take you through the roll call. Chloe, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've marked you as present. Councillor Rachel Taylor.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Dean Causey.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Chris Jones.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Hugh James. Councillor Sheila Penry.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Sean Percy.
Present.
Councillor Cypher Harman.
I'm present, Chloe.
Councillor Nigel Hunt.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Scott Bamsey. Councillor Jamie Evans. And Councillor Simon Noyle.
I'm here, thanks, Chloe.
Thank you. And then Cabinet members, Councillor Annette Wingrave.
Present, Chloe.
And Councillor Leanne Jones.
Present, Chloe.
Thank you. And then officers, Nicola Pierce. Nicola Pierce.
Sorry, I had my mute button on then. Sorry, yeah, I'm present, Chloe.
Thank you. Simon Brennan.
Present, Chloe.
Kerry Morris.
Yeah, present, Chloe.
Andrew Collins.
Present.
Chris Millis.
Present, thanks.
Thank you. Claire Jones.
Present, Chloe.
Neil Chappell.
Present, Chloe.
Thank you. Lisa Willis.
Present, Chloe.
Liddell.
Present, Chloe.
McGavigan.
Present.
And Tammy Davis.
Present.
Have I missed any officers who are participating in today's meeting? Nope, I think that's everyone. That's the roll call complete, Chair.
Thank you, Chloe. The next item on the agenda is the Chair's announcements. At pre-briefing, we've decided to scrutinise this morning items 7, items 8, items 9, items 11, item 12, one of the urgent item, which is the Hackney Travel Fare increase, and the private report, item 17. Next item on the agenda is the declarations of interest. So can members please indicate whether they have any declaration in relationship to the items that we have chosen to scrutinise, please? Only those items we've chosen to scrutinise. Any declaration of interest, please?
I see none, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Chloe. Next item is we will now move to the Cabinet Board agenda for pre-decision scrutiny. And as indicated, item 7 is the first item that we chose to scrutinise, which is the Environment Update Report, which is on pages 11 and to 30. Which officer do you want to have a brief update on this report, and which officer is taking this report this morning, please?
Chair, I'm taking the report this morning.
Lovely, Nicola. Yeah, go on.
I'm more than happy to give an update. if needed. The report is quite comprehensive. It was written, or we started writing it in the summer of last year. I think it was in response to the fact that a number of members of the public thought the council had closed during the pandemic and didn't actually appreciate the amount of work that was going on, despite the fact that we were in the middle of a pandemic. So what we did is we pulled together some information to identify what work streams were continuing to operate, which was basically most of our business as usual activity, as well as a significant increased workload in response to the pandemic, to sort of protect the health and well-being of our communities, as well as the other work that we were undertaking in response to the climate change crisis. So we pulled this report together last summer. We did update it just before the end of 2021, where we took the report to Cabinet members briefing. As a consequence of taking it to that meeting, it was we were asked to take it to the various cabinet boards and associated scrutinies, just to give members a flavour of what work has been undertaken during the 2021 and to a certain extent 2020 period. It is only a snapshot in time, because as you'll appreciate, work continues to place demands on our services. So, you know, there has been a significant amount of work undertaken since this report was initially prepared. You know, the report initially indicates what our original response to the pandemic was, because as you'll appreciate, it hit us hard and fast right in the very beginning, and our staff were instrumental in setting up the field hospitals, organising the transport hub and food distribution hub. I appreciate this was then passed on to the Safe and Well service, but it was initially established by the Environment and Regen Directorate. The TTP service was originally established back in 2020 and still continues today, albeit there are plans to sort of decommission that service in accordance with government policy. And we also undertook a lot of cross-cutting work. So we've been working on our response to the energy agenda and the decarbonisation agenda. We've been working on the city deal. You know, as is indicated within the report, we are leading on 2 projects, one of which is a regional project, which is the homes as power stations, which is requiring funding of £15 million from the government, but it will lever in £490 million as a consequence, and we'll hope to enable our housing stock across the region to become more energy efficient in terms of retrofit work as well as new build. And we're also leading on the Supporting Innovation Low Carbon Growth project, which again brought in £47.5 million and will lever in a further £51 million. Our staff are active in terms of other business as usual activity. We are reviewing the LDP. As members know, we are currently in the candidate stage process of the LDP. We're also working with colleagues across the region to secure evidence to inform the strategic development plan, which we are required statutorily to provide for the South West region of Wales. We, as members will probably know, because I'm sure that Gcre has been given regular updates, we had a very successful consultation undertaken in terms of the active travel network maps. So we have obviously been renewing and reviewing those during the pandemic. We've also been successful in terms of implementing a number of ecological projects. The Lost Peatlands project, it was slow to start because of problems that we were experiencing, but now that is up and running and we have staff in place who are implementing that, and we are leading the way in terms of that carbon sequestration work. We are also leading on major regeneration and planning projects. Members will know, because I know some of you are on the planning committee, about the wildlife Wild Fox Resort development, which used to be the Avon Valley project. You know, that is really exciting and could be transformational from the Avon Valley. I'm pleased to say that outline planning permission has been granted, the Section 106 has been signed, and the decision notice has been released. So staff within various services within the authority or within the directorate are now working with the developers to progress through to the next stage, which is the detailed reserve matter stage. But we're also working with our business colleagues within the area to ensure that we are maximising the opportunities in terms of employment. So we are maximising local supply chains and, as I say, linking in with employees and our employment service to ensure that local people have access to those jobs either at construction or operational stage. You know, there could be over 900 operational jobs associated with that development when it's up and running. So it could have huge benefits, not just for the Avon Valley, but for the wider Neath, Talbot and regional area. We are also working on the Gcre scheme, which I know, Chair, you are very familiar with because of your role in planning and being a local member. And I know Councillor Dean Causey is also on the call. He's a local member. That has been granted planning permission, and again a group of officers are working with the developers on the next stage of development to ensure that that again is a successful project. In terms of more economic development activity, members will be aware we've launched our branding, our destination branding for Neath Talbot to place us front and centre and increase the attractiveness of Neath Talbot to visitors, whether they be day visitors or overnight visitors, and the latter is what we want to encourage more of, so that people stay in the area and they spend their money, and also see what assets we have in Neath Talbot that perhaps many don't appreciate. We've been working on our regional economic development strategy, so that has been agreed by all 4 authorities within the region, including Neath Talbot, and as a consequence of that we have developed an economic development plan which should enable us to draw down funding and secure further economic development projects within Neath Talbot going forward. We've also been working with colleagues across the region to deliver our economic development strategy for the region. And members will be aware we have a DARE strategy already, which is our decarbonisation and renewable energy strategy. We're doing a gap analysis on that at the moment to establish what additional work we require to enable that to be a net zero transition plan. So that work is ongoing at the moment, and hopefully when that work is completed, we will bring that report before members so that you can see the journey that we are proposing to go on to ensure that we as an authority are net zero by 2030, and to enable the business community and our local residents to minimise their carbon footprint going forward, and hopefully in turn reverse the impacts upon climate change. Now, in addition to that, members will be aware we have been delivering projects on the ground. So the Plaza is one such project. We're hopefully about a month away from making that from completing that project. We've had a couple of issues which has delayed delivery. Kevin Syson, that was delivered during the pandemic, and I think the official opening is next week. So that is another success story in terms of our 21st Century Schools programme. There are lots of other projects which are too numerous to name in terms of the work that our teams have been delivering. And this work that I'm talking about this morning only relates to the work that responds directly to this scrutiny and cabinet board. Obviously, the Environment and Regeneration Directorate reported street scene and engineering as well, and there's a lot of work that has been undertaken in that area, in that cabinet board's portfolio, which we will be reporting to that cabinet board. But if members want any further detail on that, I'm more than happy to elaborate further. I was just going to leave it there, Chair, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions should members have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you for that update, and a very important update. And may I say, there's some exciting times here in Neath Talbot, especially under the remit of this particular scrutiny committee. I've always said it's one of the best committees to be on for the good news stories, that's for sure. But thank you for that, and thank you for mentioning for me to remind members that when they bring their questions to you now, to not try and go into the street scene. That's for that scrutiny committee to deal with. Try to be precise and concise in this remit of regen, please. In pre-briefing, there was the first indication was Councillor Sean Percy. So over to you, Sean, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Nicola, for the report and sort of running through some of the highlights. I think I mentioned in pre-briefing it is quite a comprehensive report. There's a lot of things crammed in there, but even reading through it, there's a lot of things not in there as well that we've been doing, and I think it is worth making that point. And when I was looking through it, I'm thinking of the energy park issues that have cropped up more recently, taking up an awful lot of staff time, resources, etc. That's not acknowledged in there. And then I'm thinking the conversations I've had with Simon and loads of other members of staff over other things in my ward, over Newbridge Road Bridge and the store and active travel and all these things that do take up a lot of time, a lot of resource, and it's just worth acknowledging how much is going on and has continued to go on over the pandemic. So I've really appreciated being able to still have that time with officers and progress some of those smaller issues in the wider context, but still big issues in our communities as well. But sort of on that sort of topic, I suppose there's a few comments in the report about sort of resilience, staffing levels, and I know planning in particular has been tricky. We've lost key members of staff. We've struggled to recruit, and I've seen that on a micro level, sort of affecting staff just not being familiar with ongoing cases. It takes time for people to get into the job and to get up to speed. So I just wondered if there was sort of an update in terms of the resilience in the economic development team, because I know some work's gone on there, and where we are in terms of building up the planning team, because I know some things have happened. So I just wondered if you could give us a quick sort of update on that one, please, Nicola. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, and thank you, Councillor Percy, for acknowledging that this report doesn't include everything. It hasn't been updated since the end of 2021, and I appreciate the energy issue in terms of the energy park isn't mentioned in here, and I suppose that's because significant developments didn't actually occur until January of 2022. We've obviously been dealing with it since the beginning of 2021, when it first was drawn to our attention and the threat of losing electricity was first raised. But we were trying to keep very low profile on the subject at that particular time, because we didn't want the situation to adversely affect the businesses in the park, because if customers of those businesses were made aware of the problem that they would potentially face, and it could undermine their the orders and the viability of those businesses going forward. So we did try to keep it on a very low profile. I'm pleased to say that we have successfully kept the electricity on to date. It's not guaranteed that the private wire network will continue to provide electricity to assets on the park, and we have assets on the park, as you're already aware. But the Welsh Government, the Council and WPD have been working behind the scenes to install a new public wire network so that we can transfer those assets and those businesses over to the new network once it's completed. So a lot of progress has been made, but it has been very, very time consuming. We have been to court and we are waiting for the outcome of that court case at the moment. In terms of other activity, I didn't mention skewing, the emergency that we dealt with in skewing, and whilst there was a lot of officers from the sort of street scene and engineering side of things responding to that, there were officers within planning and regen who were also involved with that work. We were providing health advice to residents, and we were dealing with the new drainage system that they were putting in place. So that drew heavily on the resources that we had. And as you indicated earlier, Councillor Percy, those resources have been limited up until now. I'm pleased to say that despite the years of austerity and the cuts that the Environment and Regen Directorate have taken over the years, and I think it's fair to say, and it's been sort of publicised well, that we've probably taken more than our fair share of cuts, and that is not noticeable now. It's been noticeable in the past, but it's very much noticeable now in terms of our ability to respond and the resilience within the service. And we have operating on the goodwill of staff to date, and we can't take that for granted. We have been allocated additional funding from the budget to enable us to increase our workforce going forward. So Kerry has been allocated funding to increase the resources within his environmental health department, and we have new staff starting in the planning department shortly. You're right in saying that we've lost key members of staff. We've managed to replace one of those members of staff, and as I say, we've got 2 new seniors starting within about 6 to 8 weeks. So hopefully we'll be back in a situation where we can respond to the planning applications that are coming through the door. In terms of Simon's area, we've also had additional resources there. We are placing additional funding within the strategic funding section to enable us to have suitable resources to put funding bids together to UK and Welsh Government and any other funding provider to ensure that we get very detailed, robust business cases in front of those funders so that we can draw on funds within very short periods of time to enable us to deliver projects across the county borough. We're also investing within our economic development section to ensure that we are supporting businesses going forward. Our architects are also getting some additional support, as well as our estates department. So we are starting to plug those gaps because there is acknowledgement that we have had insufficient levels of staff in more recent years, and dare I say it, we've been firefighting in areas rather than providing sort of a more more strategic response to the issues that we have been faced with. So I'm optimistic that things are looking up. Obviously, having the funding available does not necessarily mean we'll get the appropriately skilled and experienced staff in place. That's the next obstacle we've got to jump over. You know, it's acknowledged that we're in a very competitive market in terms of employment, and we're competing not only against the private sector but other local authorities within the region. Hybrid working has helped staff to access employees over and above their local area, and we will benefit from that, but we will also have to ensure that we retain skilled staff going forward. So we have to ensure that we have the right terms and conditions in place to get the staff in, and more importantly, keep the good staff that we value. So hopefully, as I say, on an optimistic note, we have started turning the corner, and we should have a fully recruited service within the next 6 months.
Thank you, Nicola. Sean, did you want to come back?
No, only just quickly to thank you for the response there. And yeah, you know, you mentioned about staff retention, which is what I was going to follow up with. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think that is the other big concern, isn't it? It's all well and good getting new posts in, but it's holding on to those people, and it is getting very, very competitive out there. And I know we are trying our best, but yeah, it's tricky. But no, I appreciate the update, and well, I'm looking forward to hopefully post election time working with the newly strengthened teams in planning and regen. So hopefully exciting times ahead. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. The next indication was Councillor Nigel Hunt, please. Nigel, still here, Chloe?
Yes, Steve, I'm okay, actually. You know, I think Sean and Nicola have been very comprehensive in their responses, and of course I would also like to see the teams, particularly in regeneration, the capacity increased, you know, so we can see out more projects. So I'm okay, Steve.
Oh, thank you, Nigel. That's very kind of you. And Sean did cover most of the questions that myself was going to ask as well. I think you've given me a comprehensive response. But on the retention and job creation, obviously you have answered the questions. But I just wondered your thoughts, Nicola, really on the difficulty of matching, as we know, forgetting this particular committee across the whole of Neath Talbot. It's very difficult competing with other authorities when it comes down to, let's be quite frank about it, it's usually the wage is the main factor why anybody would want to do a particular job, in essence. And I just wondered, you know, like on All Wales, do you have conversations with the WLGA and others within your own remit in your broader committees and corporate conversations with regards to how you tell us, really, while we hear councillors, how to support so that we do have the best people? Because in fairness, over the years, I think it's been something said by many different leaders and cabinet members that we do retain the best people for the best jobs, and therefore the wage tag comes with that responsibility, of course. So I just wondered where we are with capacity, resources and so forth, so that we can go out to the market and get the very best people, which is obviously beneficial to this authority in everything we do. Because the last thing I would mention, the challenges that are going to come our way through, as you said, the austerity, the Ukraine situation, the energy costs and so forth is so huge, is that you've got a very difficult job to do. But nevertheless, you have to do it and put Neath Talbot at the forefront of anything across Wales in how we deliver services and to our constituents overall. So it's sort of into Sean's question, but I just wondered the bigger plans then, if you know what I mean. You know me well enough now to understand my language. Not many people do, but I'm sure you do. But just those couple of little points from me, Nicola, please.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hunt. I think it's fair to say historically local authorities, including Neath Talbot, have relied on the fact that we have a good pension scheme for staff, which is always something that attracts staff. And we've had the flexible working arrangements in place, you know, that we've provided the type of experience for staff which perhaps couldn't compare with the private sector in terms of the work-life balance that we were able to offer with our flexible working arrangements. That has been slightly diluted during the pandemic and since, you know, in more recent months, because obviously the private sector have now mobilised themselves into the hybrid working environment as well. So they're able to provide that sort of more flexible working environment for their staff. And more recently, we've lost a member of staff, albeit they're not from our directorate, but they were helping our directorate in terms of recruitment and retention. And ironically, they've left the organisation for an alternative post within another company who have offered that person a higher salary and a 4-day working week. So, you know, there are definitely lessons for us to learn going forward in trying to make us a more attractive employer in terms of that work-life balance. If we push our staff too far, we will see those hard-working staff leave for alternative employers. We know in the public sector that salary is an issue, and we also know that some of the authorities within our region pay higher salaries for similar roles. So we are working with our colleagues within HR to try and address that and to look to see how it can be a fairer situation within the region, because if that situation continues, we will undoubtedly lose more staff. I think with Neath but Talbot being the place where we are now, there are so many exciting opportunities coming our way and challenges. We mentioned the developments referred to earlier on. Our decarbonisation agenda is a real positive challenge for us, and we have so many companies wanting to locate in Neath but Talbot and do business here and improve the sort of skills and opportunities for our communities. And some members of staff want those challenges. They want to work in an authority that is where there are exciting opportunities ahead of them. Some of the members of staff who've recently accepted contracts within our planning service were attracted by the fact that there are so many exciting projects coming, and they haven't necessarily been exposed to such opportunities in the authorities that they've worked in. So we do have those opportunities coming forward, but we do really need to look at where we sit in comparison to our neighbouring authorities so that we can provide that better sort of leveler playing field, because undoubtedly the challenge will continue in terms of retaining the staff that we have. So I know that probably doesn't answer your question, because I'm not sure that there is an easy answer to it, but our HR colleagues have set up what's known as an organisational development team, and that team is trying to enable us to recruit to those very difficult to recruit to posts, because you'll be shocked to hear that we've been out about 4 times for some jobs and we're not having any candidates, or if we do, they are not experienced or not suitably qualified and therefore not appointable. So we need to look at other ways in terms of selling ourselves and recruiting staff, but also we need to ensure that we're balancing out the offer that we're able to make with that which is available from other employers. So yeah, it is definitely a challenge going forward, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola, and you have answered my question. I mean, it is a difficult one and you're doing your best. I'm sure all members would agree that the service you provide is excellent service, and you are working extremely hard. The stress levels of all your team and everybody else, I'm sure, are quite high at times, but no, keep up the good work, and thank you for that. I don't see any other indications on this item, so if I take you back to it, this item is only for noting. So we'll note the report and move on to the next item, which is item 8, and that's the Neath but Talbot led Swansea Bay City Deal projects funding agreement, and this again is a report for noting, but Simon is the officer for this one, so I'll hand over you for a brief summary, Simon, before I go to any questions. Thank you.
Actually, Chair, if it's okay, Lisa is going to give us an introduction on this one because it's Lisa's piece of work, and alongside Lisa today we have Una Gavigan, who's the Homes as Power Stations program manager, and Brett Suddle, who's just joined us.
Oh,
so
excellent. Well, welcome to everybody I haven't met, and I'm sure on behalf of the committee, thank you for being employed by our council. Just after the follow on from what Nicola just said. So over to you then, Lisa.
Yeah, okay. We were just concerned, Steve, after the last discussion, that he was going to stay, to be honest. So
I'm sorry, I might have put them off. Go on, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning. This, as you said, this report is for information. It's in relation to the 2 Swansea Bay City Deal projects that Neath but Talbot is leading on. That's the Homes as Power Stations, which is a regional project to encourage energy efficiency in homes across the region. And as Simon mentioned, Una Gavigan is the project manager for that. Una took up the post in November, so we're in delivery phase. So Una's working to get the Financial Centres Fund launched, the Supply Chain Fund launched. So there's a lot of work going on there. And then the Supporting Innovation and Low Carbon Growth, which is a very exciting programme of 7 projects. And Brett started with it yesterday, so this is day 2 for Brett. So yeah, so I covered the report, and it's to make this board aware that the business cases were approved in the summer of last year. The funding agreements have now been signed and agreed. So Carmarthenshire Council is the council body for the Swansea Bay City Deal. So we've now agreed and signed the funding agreement, so we can now start drawing down money. So the 15 million City deal linked to the Homes as Power Stations project, and 47.7 million City deal linked to the low carbon growth. The low carbon growth is at various stages of development. For example, the Technology Centre at Baglan Energy Park, so that's part funded by European structural funds and City deals. So that's open. We're due to hand over to our property team in the next few weeks. Another one of those projects is the air quality monitoring sensors, which is a pilot scheme in the Talbot area. So the sensors are installed. And we've also got a property development fund. Nicola mentioned earlier that lots of developers and lots of businesses are really keen to invest in Neath Talbot, and we've got a lack of suitable sites and premises. So there's a £5 million City Deal funded pot of property development fund for the Talbot waterfront enterprise zone area, which will be hopefully we'll be launching in the next month or two. So April or May, that'll be launched for so that'll be to work so developers will part fund that. So that will draw in an extra 5 million from private sector funding as well. So yeah, the report shows what the state of development are, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. As indicated in pre-briefing, I'll go firstly to Councillor Sean Percy, please. Was it you, Sean? Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's usually a good guess, isn't it, if you're not sure?
Yeah, definitely.
No, thanks for the report there, and yeah, it's nice to see these sort of moving forward now. We got staff appointed in roles to sort of drive the projects forward, because it sort of felt quite theoretical for a while, isn't it? We've seen a lot of things on paper, but obviously we've seen the air quality stuff go up in the area in Port Talbot. I've seen the new build in the energy park. It looks fantastic as well. So yeah, that's all really great. So I haven't got any technical questions in relation to the funding agreement, so I hope that's probably reassuring. In terms of updating progress, I guess one of the projects, and I think I've had a few chats with Simon about this, is in terms of the EV charging infrastructure. I was just wondering if we had a bit more of an idea yet where that may be going. I know there's kind of been a lot of discussion and uncertainty around how that might be delivered and how that might work. And then the second question, which you may have answered in your sort of introduction, was around the property development fund, and obviously we've acknowledged how important that is, but obviously it's not just key for Harbourside, it's an issue across the county, isn't it? And I was wondering, is it just for Harbourside? And I think that's what you've said in terms of this particular stream and this particular fund, that it is. So if you could confirm that, that'd be helpful as well. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
All right, Lisa. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Thank you for the questions and your interest in the programme. As you mentioned, a very exciting programme of decarbonisation linked projects. In terms of the EV charging, we are due to appoint somebody to work with us, so who's a specialist in the field of EV from Swansea University, to work with us to take that forward. So that's you'll see progress, and we can update this board on progress in that. So they'll be on, I think, Simon, in the next few weeks they'll be on board, won't they?
He's due to start, I think, in about a fortnight's time. And I think the only thing I would say on that as well is there are an increasing number of funding streams starting to emerge that that we need to take advantage of, and to do that we need a comprehensive strategy, really, to say that, rather than doing it on a piecemeal basis, that we're taking it forward in the way that it should be, and plugging the gaps, because there'll be an element of it will be private sector investment with companies who want to put them in, and then there'll be I think the local sector, the local public sector investment then, which is trying to plug the gaps and deal with the areas that are more difficult to reach and which maybe not quite so financially viable as the private sector ones.
So in the next few weeks, Councillor Percy, you'll see progress with that. In terms of property development fund, you're correct. It's geographically located to the so the Harbourside, the Baglan Energy Park, and the Baglan Industrial Estate area. Because it's quite a small amount of funding, we're going to focus in linking, because the low carbon programme is a place-based approach, and but if there is, we've got demand, we've got about 5 people waiting to submit applications in for that fund. But of course, it's something that this board may wish to look at for future and widen that, to attract more funding to develop that scheme further across the county borough. And potentially something we could look at for levelling up fund in the next round. But at the moment, sites and premises is not one of the priorities of the Levelling Up Fund, but we have made representations to UK government. Just for information, I know Councillor Jones met very briefly. We took UK government yesterday on a whistle-stop tour of Neath Talbot to show them the priority areas of Neath Talbot, so they're familiar with Neath Talbot in terms of Levelling Up Fund, shares prosperity funds. So and we're looking at the demand. We showed them the Harbside area, the Valleys areas. So yes, that was a very useful meeting yesterday as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Before I come back to Sean, I'll go back to Simon Brennan, please.
I was just going to add, Chair. I mean, I think we've discussed it many times in this group, haven't we, in this committee, about our difficulty with sites and premises. You know, we're not alone in that. It's an issue across South West Wales and even South East Wales to a certain extent, but more difficult, I think, in our area. Two reasons. One is the availability of remediated land and sites that are ready to go, and the second one then is around the viability gap between the cost of construction and the value of the premises thereafter. We say the same thing to Welsh Government continually. That is the area that we need to focus on. I think that penny was dropping, but of course now the funding regime will have changed, and it might be that we're now making that case to UK Gov rather than Welsh Gov. But we shall see how the funding streams pan out and the mix of capital and revenue. But it's definitely something that I think that we need to do, and I suspect in many ways there'll need to be a public sector involvement here, because even when we're offering the money to the private sector, they usually want to see a pre-let, and of course there's a difficulty getting a pre-let and then having 18 months to 2 years to construct a building. So the tenants don't really want that. They want it here and now. So there's an element of risk, and I think we're probably the ones who will need to take that risk to get involved. And you know, as I mentioned yesterday in the all members seminar, we're hopeful that there'll be maybe a change of ownership of one of our key sites in the not too distant future, and how we plug into that, I think, is very important over the next few years.
Thank you, Simon. Sean, do you want to come back?
Yeah, no, thanks both for that, and I think yeah, in terms of the development fund, and that's the waterfront enterprise zone boundary, is it? In terms of, so it's not Harbourside specifically, it's Harbourside, Bagman Energy Park, and yeah, so yeah. That's actually a bit reassuring that it was a bit wider, because I think I thought it was just the waterfront Harbourside bit. So yeah, no, so that's great. Yeah, in terms of obviously the EV stuff, I've mentioned it quite a few times in committee, but I think one of the key things is one of the projects is kind of closest to people as well. It's something they're physically going to go and walk up and use, and we get, and I'm sure I'm not the only member that's had people approach them, because a lot of people are want to make choices about, you know, changing their vehicles, and I want to know how that's going to work for them. So I think that's the project that's going to have a really, you know, wide reach in the county. So I'd be really excited to see how that pans out. The other point that I did want to just quickly ask was around the Homes as Power Stations project, which was how that is going to interface with private sector in terms of new build, because I can think of some private sector developments ongoing where the green credentials are really not great at all. They're being, you know, built to building regulations as was, and not really much further. So I was just wondering how that process is going to work. Obviously, the RSLs seem to be really keen. I'm thinking of Titarian in my patch. The development they're doing is really good. It's really green, but the private sector seem a little bit more reluctant. So I was wondering if we've got a bit of an idea around that. Thanks, Chair.
Is that Lisa or Simon want to come back on that?
Shall I start, and then maybe Una can come in, because I know. So in terms of the Homes as Power Stations, the aim of it is to sort of test the concept in the public sector and the RSL sector, and then show that. So when we get the optimum mix of renewables technologies, so driving the costs down because there's more demand, then we'd roll out to private sector. But I know Una's been approached by quite a number of private sector developers who wanted to. The value of the Homes as Power Stations is that we're going to share the learning, so it's not just keeping it. So I'm not going to keep on repeating the mistakes, because some energy efficiency programs haven't shared the learning on an open platform. So the private sector are really keen to do that. So we can, it's a pioneering project. So we can, it's find that optimum mix. So then we can say share that learning. So the private sector know exactly then what will work for different tenures and different geographies. So that's the share is that's where the private sector will come in. There will be a financial incentives fund to provide. It's not a huge amount of money because it's across the region, but it will provide that gap funding for the private sector as well as the RSLs and the local authorities and public sector to fund the gap between what would be a standard build and what would be an additional build to increase the efficiency of the home. We're going to be carrying out the comprehensive monitoring. So we're going to be going out to procurement shortly on that, looking at building performance, but also how the social science and how people behave when they maybe not having radiators, they got the air source heat pumps, and how so we can track that and educate people to these new technologies. So that's going to be really interesting and exciting. The data we'll have from that, and we'll be sharing that on a public platform for all sectors.
Simon, did you want to add?
No, I think that's a fairly comprehensive answer from Lisa. As you say, we're at the early stages of the programme so far, but it is about normalising that, and there'll be a two-pronged attack. I mean, at some point potentially in the not too distant future, there may be a change in building regs as well. So you'll see an enforcement as well as an encouragement. But what we want to do is to get that encouragement in early to try and normalise the behaviour, but also to develop a supply chain around it. Because if you don't have the supply chain, I mean, especially the issues in the last couple of months have made it even worse with Brexit before that as well. Supply chains have been fractured. I mean, it was interesting. We mentioned then about the EV cars, and we had a little report through this week saying that, of course, some of the raw components for the EV cars and batteries and things comes from Russia. So, you know, there will be an effect on that market as well. Everything is unfortunately affected by disruption across Europe.
Thank you.
Could I just add?
Oh, go on, Lisa.
Sorry, Chair. UNA's setting up a skills group to ensure there are sufficient skills across the region as well to keep up with the technology. So that is something that is going to be set up in the next week or two.
Excellent, good. Sean, you want to come back again?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's really reassuring actually that knowledge is going to be shared around you know what's the learning, and I think that's a big thing for the private sector as well, is they need the confidence that if they do X, this is going to be the outcome. You know, it's you know, it's all about the bottom line for them as well, isn't it? So if we can, you know, increase you know the demand and the production and make it a bit more mainstream, then that's great. And I think in terms of we had a similar discussion around behaviour of people in some of these homes with new technology with Titarian recently, because they put in air source heat pumps into some of their new build out down in Sandfields, and you know they're going to have to do a bit of work. We had that discussion. Well, tenants are going to have to understand that it is different, and it is going to, so that there may be a link up there in terms of some of the learning from them. I'm sure those contacts are already there, but it'll be really interesting to see all that come together. No, thanks all, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Sean. Next indicator is Councillor Nigel Hunt, please.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Look, I'm really pleased to hear that officers and cabinet members are speaking to the UK government with regards to the Level Up Fund. I think that's a real positive thing to hear. With the homes as power station scheme, there's going to be, we're looking at about 10,000 homes. There's going to be 7,000 refits. Will people be eligible throughout the county? Will homeowners be eligible throughout the county and throughout the region? Or is it going to be in designated areas? And if so, do we kind of know the criteria as to the homes that will get the benefit of this refit? I'd also like to ask about the air quality monitoring project. I'd just like to have a few more details on it, really. And, you know, there are certain areas which really need monitoring. There's certain areas which really need to be monitored. And for specific pollution. So we've got a store in a built-up area, in a residential area. Well, of course, it's 50 megawatts. It's gas burning. it's 40% efficient. So there's going to be a lot of NOx released, and that's a local pollution. And, you know, that can have some really detrimental effects on residents who live close to that. But the monitoring, I'd like more detail on where we are monitoring this pollution from. And also in Margam, there's certain parts of, you know, we've got in the Talbot area, we suffer with high levels of hydrocarbon from PARs, from PAR, and the monitoring station is in the fire station, which is in Talbot. Now that's a couple of miles away from the source of that pollution. And there are thousands of homes in urban Margam that are much closer to the source. And that just doesn't sit right with me. Surely the station should be at least closer to the source than the closest resident. So I'd just like to have a bit of reassurance on that and detail on the air quality monitoring project. And also, will we be getting updates on other city deals that we are not leading on? So, you know, like the digital infrastructure, which is led by Carmarthenshire. I mean, I think that's pivotal to the county going forward, and I think we really need to get it right strategically what we're going to get out of that city deal project. So, yeah, I'd just like to ask, really, will, as great as it is to have updates on the projects that we are leading on, I feel it's just as important that we get updates on projects that are in the city region that we're not leading on. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Before I bring you in, Lisa and Simon, obviously the remit is the funding agreement. That's the item, but a lot of questions in there are part of are not allowed. I want to say, Nigel, they're quite valid questions, but if you haven't got the answers, obviously please say so, and for certain parts of it, and we'll understand. And anything that you need to go away to find out, I'm sure you can talk to Nigel prior to Perda with more concise answers and bring them back to him if possibly. But for now, you've heard what Nigel has to say. So Simon or Lisa, who wants to go first?
I can cover off some areas, but I'll have to defer some. So in terms of the Financial Incentives Fund, the homes as power stations, that's something the criteria we're working on. So Una is working on with a number of colleagues from across the region, and the criteria will be, it'll be more for developers rather than for individual homeowners. There's not enough money for individual homeowners, but we will be acting as a signposting system. So there's other Councillor Hunt, there's other funding streams available direct to homeowners, which we will be. Una's going to be establishing. Sorry, Una's going to have a lot of to-do list, but Una's going to be establishing a signposting service which is user-friendly for the public, so they'll know where to go for funding, for retrofits and for technology. In terms of the Homes as Power Station Financial Incentives Funds, that's linked to developers, so the RSLs, private sector developers, local authorities. So then we can track then the leverage, which was going to go towards our match funding. So but we can share the criteria with this group, but we'll also going forward share updates on how we are signposting individual homeowners to other funding sources. In terms of the update in city deals, yeah, I completely agree. We can provide updates on other city deal projects, and there is a regional board for the digital project, and we will be getting to Neath Talbot. We'll be getting additional resource, which is aligned to that digital project. And in terms of work programme, so be more progress. I think all the projects now are starting delivery phase, so you'll see a lot more activity. So we can provide updates on the digital, but also on the skills projects and all the other linked projects. Councillor Hunt on that one. In terms of the air quality, I can only comment on the air quality pilot scheme, which is linked to City Deal funding. So the aim of the City Deal funding for the air quality monitoring sensors was to trial new technologies. Currently, there are stationary official monitoring stations, and Vortex developed a very sensitive, low-cost, mobile air quality sensors, which could be deployed across different locations. So the pilot at the moment funded by City Deal is monitoring the data in the pilot area of Talbot. And maybe Kerry, can I hand over to you to take on the other part of that question?
Yeah, happy to add what you've covered, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, as I said, there's two things in there. There's the Vortex Project, which Lisa has just briefly covered there. That I think there are 70 of these sensors in total that have been sort of distributed at various locations, and that you know, it's early days of that pilot project. It is a pilot project. You know, the technology is unproven by definition, so you know, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of those that information as we get it. It will give us sort of more improved, you know, localized information about sources of pollution. So we'll look forward to receiving the data as that comes forward. Councillor Hunt mentioned the store. We are environmental health officers are working on a localized project whereby we're going to set up a sort of a 12-month study, if you like, with you know, in conjunction with the Vortex project, so we can look specifically at that particular facility. And I know, Councillor Hunt, you've raised concerns about that facility on many occasions before. So we're in the process of setting that up at the moment, and it'll run for a 12-month study. So we'll have that raw data then on the back of rolling that issue out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kerry. Simon, did you want to come in on anything?
Just two little points to add, I suppose, Chair. One was around the HAPS programme. I suppose, I mean, one of the main points of it as well in terms of the retrofit is, I mean, obviously we've got a lot of private homeowners as well who perhaps don't fit into any of the other categories. You know, there's not an RSL looking after them, etc., etc. And the biggest risk, the biggest problem, I think, for those homeowners is the element of risk. A lot of these technologies are relatively embryonic, and people are quite concerned, I suppose, about risking their own money to try and put something in that they're not sure whether it'll work in the way that they would hope it would work. And so there's 2 points to that, really. One is about the scheme will bring a bit more information to that, I think, and also the work around skills and training to make sure that we've got people out there who are suitably qualified and experienced to go and assess these properties, because each property is different in many ways, and to assess what sort of kit needs to go in there, but also then people who are suitably trained to install the kit and maintain it thereafter. So I think it's about de-risking a little bit of that if we possibly can. That's the sort of thrust of it, I suppose. And then in terms of the air quality, I think, you know, Kerry covered that off, and with Lisa as well. It'll just give us a little bit more data, and as I say, all the units are movable, and we can add to the system as well. So I think that just gives us a really good idea of why things are happening and when they're happening, and then you can take action after that, then, can't you? But unless you have that data, it's really hard to get the right sort of reaction in place.
Thank you, Simon. Nigel, are you happy?
Yes, Steve, I'm happy with the replies, and I'd like to, you know, continue to speak to Kerry, I suppose, out of this meeting, and I'm really pleased to hear that that scheme is coming to place. And if I do get re-elected, I certainly would like to stay in touch on that, and hopefully have some input on it as well. There's some expertise around me that can definitely help, you know. So yeah, thanks. And as it's great to hear that we will be kept informed on the digital infrastructure, and we might be having some more resources on it, because I think that's pivotal to the county's sustainability going forward. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that, Nigel. Sean, you want to come back?
Yeah, no, only briefly. You know, Kerry just mentioned the project around the store, which is obviously in my ward in Sandfields East. So I just wanted to thank him and Kelvin for taking the time to, you know, speak to myself, Councillor Hunt, and the other local members over the last well, quite a while now, isn't it? To sort of listen to our concerns on that. So I'm pleased there's some progress, and I look forward to seeing the detail. I'm sure we'll be in touch in due course. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. I don't see any further indications to ask questions. So as I previously mentioned, this report again is for information. Therefore, we only need to note the report. Before I move on, Sean, is that a legacy hand? Next item on the agenda, item 9, is the Substance Misuse Action Fund Grant Agreement. This is a decision report and it's on pages 123 to 140. The report officers will be Chris Millis and Claire Jones. So I'll go over to both of them if there's anything they'd like to add or update prior to questions from members. So either of you got anything or just as the report is written?
No, thank you, Chair.
I've got nothing to add, Chair.
That's great then. I will go straight to questions. And in pre-briefing, Councillor James, unfortunately, had other meetings, urgent meetings he needed to attend to. But he asked one quick question, and he was asking whether it was sustainability with the fund, whether it's long-term funding that you will be available to you, so that whatever actions are taken will, and further actions, you'll be financially able to in the remit of the work that you do. That was his sort of questions in pre-briefing. I think I covered that, Chloe, isn't it? That was sort of counted
Yep, that's
James's
right, Chair.
question. Yeah, there we are. So Chris or Claire?
Chris, you happy for me to take that?
Yeah, okay, Claire, thanks.
So thank you, Chair. Up until more recently, obviously, we've had yearly Substance Misuse Action Fund grant from Welsh Government. So, you know, that in itself precludes some sort of long-term planning. But nonetheless, we view the services in a long-term way. More recently, however, Welsh Government is trying to give us more financial certainty over maybe 3 years, and if that happens, we would welcome that. The reports outline that the funding will be for what's left of this financial year and the whole of the next financial year. And in looking at our priorities, or the Area Planning Board, in looking at its priorities going forward, will probably wish to continue to support such schemes. Having said that, we are undertaking a strategic review of prescription services, so that may mean that we'll do things in a different way, but prescription services are an integral part of what we do through the Area Planning Board. So whether it's in this format or another format, we'll be continuing with prescription services. And one of the things that we're seeing is that perhaps we have services for those who are being maintained on a prescription for opiate dependency, and those at the really chaotic end. And maybe there's people in the middle as well that aren't getting the support. So we do in this strategic review, the Area Planning Board support team is undertaking this review, and it'll look at, amongst other things, what's working, what's not working, and what the future model should look like to fill all of those gaps. So it is, whatever form it'll be, there will be some sort of prescribing service. Does that answer your question? Does that answer the question?
I'm sure Councillor James would have welcomed that response, Claire, and I'm sure Chloe can sort of let Councillor James know. Well, it's recorded anyway. You could probably look back on this meeting. I forgot about that. So, Claire, you've got your hand up again. You want to come back?
Sorry, Chair, I also forgot to mention that the Area Planning Board is embarking on a change journey to try to work towards an integrated public health model, and you won't be able to have that sort of model without prescription services. I'm sorry, I did have it on my note here and then I forgot to mention it, but it is important.
Very important.
Thank you, Chair.
And thank you for remembering. Chris, do you want to add anything?
No, thank you, Chair. Just to thank the team for putting the report together. And it is a vital service for those people that sometimes need support in the decisions that they've made or are making at the moment.
Yes, certainly. I think should we all concur with that. Any other member got any questions on this particular item? I don't see no hands up. Just a quick one from me, Claire, as we work very closely together anyway. I mean, I don't underestimate the excellent work you and your team and Chris does in the capacity that you have. And it's much wider than just this particular item. Of course, an action fund and a grant agreements are so important to deliver what is needed. And in the report and the wider reports that you do, there's some superb work. And I think you need to take that back to your team and all those involved in it, because it's so very important. It's recognised that you're trying to tackle something that sometimes is very, very difficult to not just comprehend, but to get at those that sometimes don't want the help. And that's key. Trying to make sure we reach out to all substance misuse people in all forms and give them the hope and the support they need. So, but when we have buildings, and we know with needle exchanges and collecting their methadone and stuff like that, so as in to help them, is the funding is sometimes, or is it a pot of funding that you may be to look at going forward to find where you can have the right locations? Because sometimes it would lead on to antisocial behaviour where they may be, as you know, collecting methadone, needle exchanges within areas that probably they shouldn't actually be concentrating on. So I just wondered where you can take it forward, perhaps in your remit, cabinet member support, council support, where you could get purpose built or use places that wouldn't add on to an antisocial behaviour in a location where these practices have to take place. Don't get me wrong, they're brilliant places and they're doing what they should be doing, but that was just my concerns and worries where they might be, and whether we can change that sort of system going forward. So that's just one from me. But as I said, and other members, that's why we're not scrutinising it too much. We all recognise the work you're doing. So, but thank you for that. So,
Thank
Chris.
you, Steve.
Yeah, Chris.
Do you want me to come
I
back,
can come in on that.
Chair?
The difficulty we have, Steve, is we're stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the correct location. It needs to be where the people are. And we take it on board that it can sometimes be seen by the public as something that they don't want on their doorstep. Location is always looked at, and we'll continue to look at it, but you have to go where the need is.
Yeah, understand that. Claire, did you want to add?
I can just add, when I mentioned about the wider public health model, we will be a part of that, not immediately, but at some point in that, whether the arrangements that we have are fit for purpose. So it's not something I can come back to immediately, Chair, but it will be something you'll be hearing about as that public health model progresses.
Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you, Claire. I know you're looking at it, and sometimes you work so hard, as I said, and so take back our best wishes and not congratulations, but you know what I mean. To the team, they're doing a fantastic job in tackling something that's so very, very difficult. Okay, any other member got any questions on this item? I don't see any. This is an item for decision. So the recommendations are on pages 131 and 132. And as you can see, they're split into various parts, but I am going to take the recommendation in its entirety, and we'll need somebody to propose and second. So can I have somebody propose and second the item in its entirety, please?
I'll propose, Chair.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Can I ask that everybody's happy with the recommendation to go to cabinet as proposed? I don't see any indication that it's not. That's lovely. So that will go to cabinet. So the next item on the agenda is agenda item 11. And I believe that's the Q3 performance indicators 2021-2022. Is that right, Chloe?
Yes, Chair, yep.
That's great. Again, this is a monitoring report, and the reporting officers, Simon and Kerry. So have you anything to add to the performance indicators report, either of you?
Nothing from me, Chair.
Not from me, Chair, either. Perhaps just to take questions if there are any.
Yes, I will go to us. I think Sean again was first. Was it on this one?
It was Councillor Nigel Hunt.
All right, Nigel. Sorry, I put Sean down as a default, as he said earlier. Yeah, sorry, Nigel. It is. Yeah, quite right. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, it's on page 160. There's the number of PM10 breaches in the air quality management area in Talbot and Talbot, and it seems it's breached a lot, really. There's red on it. There's 32 breaches compared to 4 in a couple of years previous. So I just want to know a bit more detail about that.
Anybody who's Kerry? Sorry, yeah, Kerry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we touched on this actually when I brought the Q2 report. I think because I think we've seen, I think certainly in Q2 and Q3 that the exceedances that we've experienced are a lot higher this year than they were last year. I think that's recognised. The annual target ultimately is 35 exceedances, so we're almost at the threshold where we will sort of push through that annual target as well. I have spoken with officers about this to try and understand sort of the detail behind what the issues are, and what they've advised is that the breach day reports that they're getting reveal that tartar is likely to be the source of the breaches that we are experiencing. I think I might have mentioned at the last meeting that obviously NRW are the regulator with the tartar site, and they're obviously investigating as we go forward. What the suggestion is that given that there's reduced production as a consequence of the COVID pandemic, this has led to some difficulties on site in terms of managing the stockpiles. So that's leading to potential more instances where fugitive dust is emitted from the site. So NRW have requested that tartar sort of provide sort of additional, I think, dust suppression measures and provide more vigilance as a consequence of these exceedances. But you know, environmental health officers are continuing to work closely with Welsh Government officials, NRW officials, to sort of pinpoint what these issues are and to investigate them accordingly. But it is a concern. You know, you know, it's you know, we've in recent years we've done very well actually in terms of this particular PI, but for some reason this particular year, and as I said, for the reasons I perhaps just outlined, that's perhaps what is underpinning the issues on this particular site. But again, you know, monitoring is continuing. You know, we've mentioned already this morning about the Vortex Project, which will hopefully give us that little bit more information about localized pollution. So, but as I said, it is a concern, and I think come the end of the reporting year, we'll perhaps be able to take stock exactly where we are in terms of these exceedances. But it does look very much like we will potentially break through that annual figure as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kelly. Nigel, want to come back? You're on mute, Nigel.
If we actually break through the exceedance levels, I mean, 32 is a lot for me anyway. If we do break through, what happens then? And are we ever going to have like an impact assessment on the health of the community that live around this industry? Because, you know, my son's got asthma, and there's high level, you know, people have a lot of respiratory illnesses. We know the cancer levels are higher. If, you know, this is more evidence that we need an impact assessment really on the population health around this area. So, you know, it's just another indicator of how bad it is to me. So, thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly, I don't know if you can answer the indicator or assessments that are ongoing, or what the future looks like. So I don't know if you want to come back on that point as well.
I mean, as I said, it's what these PIs are linked to, of course, are the air quality objectives, and that's what we need to report on annually on a yearly basis to Welsh Government. You know, it's not you know, if indeed we do break through that sort of annual target, it won't be the first year that's happened. You know, it has happened in the past. Obviously, we've got the air quality management area in Margam Taibach, so that's very much linked to this. And as I said, you know, the pilot scheme, the Vortex monitors that are being rolled out, all this is governed and pointing to a better understanding of what issues are happening locally. But as I said, you know, we will be working closely with NRW. NRW are the regulator of course of this particular site, so they are the lead agency in this respect. But you know, Welsh Government colleagues and obviously environment health officers do work closely with NRW on this particular site. So you know, whether there will be any sort of future detailed health assessment specifically as a consequence of this site, well, you know, that'll remain to be seen, but certainly those discussions will be had.
All right, Nigel.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Kerry. Simon,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
I'm sure they will do all that's necessary, and taking on board your health question. It's obviously very important. You're quite right. So, Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I just wanted to add really to the discussion in the sense that Councillor Hunt's not on the Tata Steel Consultative Group, but we met last week, maybe, losing track of time, but we discussed this exact issue in that group with representatives from NRW, because obviously it was flagged up. We get the exceedance data in that committee as well. And I know NRW sort of flagged to us then that there will likely be a discussion specifically about, well, what's the detail of why it's happened this year. You know, Kerry's alluded to some of the potential issues, but I think from what we heard from NRW, Welsh Government will likely specifically convene a piece of work to properly understand it. So I think that would be really interesting for us to see that and understand why it is significantly worse, because obviously what we've seen certainly in the Tata Steel Consultative Group is when NRW identifies specific issues as the regulator, they can then instruct Tata Steel very specifically what they need to do to address it. So it's unpicking those issues is really important. So I'm hoping that work does happen. We understand exactly what the cause is, and then Tata can be given those very specific instructions on what they need to do to rectify it. But I just wanted to flag up that some of us had discussed it in that other meeting recently, and directly with NRW as well, which was really helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Sean. Nigel, you want to come back again?
Yeah, I just want to point out that I'm not on that Tata Consultative Committee, but that's not through my choice. You know, I would stand on that committee and I would hold them to account in that committee, but it's not through my decision why I'm not on it. So I just want to point that out, actually. All right.
That's fine, Nigel. And just to concur with Councillor Sean Percy, I sit on the Tata Steel committee as well, and I can confirm that everything by local members, irrespective if you are not on there, are bringing up all the issues that you have mentioned and trying to get NRW and Tata Steel themselves accountable, and Neath and Talbot, I may add, who are also monitoring officers within that sort of remit. And just finally, I think any questions you have for that committee, I appreciate maybe it's a bit late now and wait to see if you're re-elected, but I'm sure, or maybe through your own group, you could get on that committee. I'm sure there'll be a way for you forward, Nigel, if I'm honest, and then you can ask you direct questions and get the appropriate answers from the relevant bodies. So I hope that you'll be able to do that in the future, because I know how passionate you are. So, okay. Right. Cabinet Member Annette Wingrave, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Nigel, you need to speak to the leader of your own group about that, because they actually select who goes from your group onto committees. So, you know, you need to speak to them about that, and perhaps hopefully after May you can come on board. All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Annette. Okay. This report again is for monitoring, as I said. So there's no recommendation. So we just need to note the report again. So moving on to item 12. This is the Audit Wales National Study, Regenerating the Town Centres in Wales. Again, a report for information. And the officers dealing with this report is back to Simon Brennan again, I believe. So, Simon, if you want to add anything before questions?
No, I don't think so, Chair. Andrew is here as well, who's been dealing with Audit Wales on that, so we'll answer the questions between us.
That's great. Okay, this report is on page 167 to 230. I'll go straight to questions. And I think I got it right this time, Councillor Percy. I think you're up first again. Sean, please.
Yeah, I think you're right now on this one, Chair. No, thanks. No, it's quite an interesting report, actually. There was a few things that jumped out to me. Number one was Audit Wales weighing in on the business rates issue, which I think was quite helpful and quite interesting in terms of adding to the sort of pressure and discussion around, you know, how ineffective it is in town centres. So that was really pleasing to see. I know Welsh Government have talked about it for a little while, haven't they? But I'm hoping this will add to the pressure to see them come up with something a bit more innovative for that, because I think we're all we've discussed this before, but it disincentivizes people setting up, doesn't it, and makes it unviable for a lot of people to trade. And I think the other thing that was interesting as well was maybe another nudge back to Welsh Government around transport access and parking. Now, Welsh Government have done a bit of work on this in the past. I know there were some studies and pilot programs on parking. So I'm wondering what's going to materialise from that. I'm not sure if Welsh Government have given a response. Do we know if they will sort of respond to this report formally in terms of some of the actions on them? Because obviously I looked at our the sort of things against local authorities, and we've passed some comment on those. But being honest, I think the interesting outcomes from here are what's directed at Welsh Government in particular, and I'd quite like to see what they've got to say. And the only other thing to say was the recommendations around multi-year allocations around funding, I'm sure would be welcomed by the team. And I'm not sure what will come of that in light of the funding situation we've discussed with UK government, perhaps leading on some of this now in terms of the funding specifically, whether that point is maybe less relevant. Yeah, so I just those points for me. I don't have any sort of specific questions at the moment, because I think in terms of what they've put to us and what they've put to local authorities, I was quite satisfied with what was written in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. While there's no questions, I think you want to pick up on a few points, Simon, or not? Up to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as ever with these things, Welsh Government are probably wrestling with what they can do and what they can't do, and funding will be a big part of that going forward, I guess. Parking is always a bit of an issue, because most businesses would say if we had free parking, then everything would be okay, and that was being picked up in some of the bid questionnaires before. But of course, then you've got to balance that out against sustainable transport and all of those things as well. So it's not as easy as just offering free transport, because that's not necessarily the policy that Welsh Government might want to pursue in terms of reducing the number of vehicle movements, etc. So, and I think you're right around the funding. That will change over a period of time, and we just need to make sure that as an authority, like the others, we're as well set as we possibly can be to take advantage of whatever is available there to come forward. Because, I mean, traditionally Welsh Government have had a town centre first policy, and we just need to work that through with UK Gov as well.
Thank you, Simon. Sean, all right? Nigel Hunt then, please, Councillor Nigel Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I concur with Councillor Percy on the issue around the rates, non-domestic rates. Really, it is outdated, and it's certainly making it difficult for people to trade in retail sector, office sectors, right across all the town centre sectors. I enjoyed reading this report. I do think that our town centres are at the heart of Welsh life. I was interested to see actually that we've got 8 town centres in Neath, Talbot, and I've tried working out where they all are. I don't know if anybody does know where the 8 is in the appendix at the end of the report. So yeah, if anybody does know the 8, I'd be grateful to hear that. And there's, you know, car parking repeatedly comes in this. Audit Wales bring it up. We are facing new challenges in our town centres, and you know, out of town shopping centres all provide free car parking. So you know, Macarthur Glen, Morva, even in my ward, you know, we got Baglan retail park, and you know, the town centres are having car parking charges, and this is having a profound and adverse effect on our town centres. I know that in Port Talbot we had a Talbot town centre partnership meeting just this week, and it was pointed out the state of the multi-storey car park that the council own and the deficiencies of that. I'd love to see an audit around our car park and possibly how to make it more welcoming, because a lot of people who come into the town centres do come in by the car park. Obviously, transport that's another thing. We'd love to see improved connectivity to our valley areas into our towns. I suppose that's also mentioned in here. And it also mentioned about digital infrastructure in our town centres and how important that's becoming for youngsters. And do we think that, you know, our own performance, I can go back to the city deal really. There's a big project led by Carmarthenshire on the on digital infrastructure, and I really hope that we do get it right for the town centres, because it is pivotal. People need Wi-Fi. People need to be connected, as they will go to places which are better connected. So I'd just like to bring that up really. And I know that we have slightly spoken about the digital infrastructure project, but if we have got any details on what areas we are targeting and how that can benefit our town centres, I'd be glad to know that. I'm sure that people in Neath Town Centre, Pontardawe Town Centre, Port Talbot, of course, and you know, there's another 5 centres, whether that's Talbot and Britain Ferry, Neath, or you know. And I think with a valley strategy, if we've got towns that areas in our valleys that are classed as town centres, maybe we strategically we could be looking for hubs in these areas with the City Deal project. So yeah, I think that about that. The one final thing is, it does mention about arts and heritage sites in our town centres and how important that is, and how beneficial that is, rather than just being based on retail and just be based on like offices. I think we can improve on this in our town centres. I can't really think of many cultural centres that are open. I know we got the Princess Royal Theatre, but you know, that's just open. That's really for the nighttime economy. It's not in the daytime. So I know there's a gallery in Queen Street in Neath, which is a private-owned gallery. But we really are short on galleries and museums in our towns, and I think we should focus on that, or try and at least consider that. And I'm hoping that the plaza is going to bring a lot of culture and heritage into the town centre. So that's just my thoughts on this report. Okay.
All right, thank you for that, Nigel. I'm sure there's a number of points he's raised and a number of questions within there between Andrew and yourself. I don't know if you want to go first, Simon, and I'm sure Andrew will come in on some of the more specific points surrounding the town centres. But Simon, you first, I should imagine, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the arts and the history of the town centres and the culture, I mean, obviously we've been looking to diversify our town centres for a little while, even pre-pandemic, when we put the plans in place to deliver the leisure facility in the heart of Neath Town Centre, which I think is a great way of getting people back into town centres and making them more viable. But you know, across the board, we've been looking at how we do that. The plaza development, as Councillor Hunt mentioned, will be an important part of it for Port Talbot as well. And retail won't be the only reason that people go to town centres going forward, and I think everybody accepts that, and it's making town centres interesting in a different way. In terms of the digital side, obviously connectivity generally is a big part. In terms of whether that's a free offer of Wi-Fi, etc. Some people will take advantage of that, some not so much interested in. People tend to be more stationary when they want to take advantage of that in restaurants or whatever it might be. But we will be looking at digital connectivity and how digital can work for our town centres as well, in terms of giving us information on where things are thriving and where perhaps more attention is needed. In terms of the rates part of it, I think, as you say, the world has changed. It changed even more during the pandemic, where there was more online shopping, and I think that needs to be balanced out, because perhaps online retailers have a much easier time of it than those who are providing physical presence within our town centres, and there needs to be more encouragement for that. And I think that's something that that Welsh Government acknowledge and are looking to see how they deal with that, I think, going forward. I mean, as ever with all taxations, if you take it away from one area, it tends to appear somewhere else. But you know, that's for them to wrestle with, I think, and come up with a solution that's more a fairer solution, I suppose, for the type of facilities and the type of businesses we've now got in town centres. And if Andrew's got anything he wants to add on to that.
Yeah. Andrew?
Business rates, which Councillor Percy raised, and I could see Councillor Head nodding in agreement, because obviously he owns a rental retail premise in himself in the town centre. The report's a bit misleading, I think, on that, because it says that the Welsh government need to look at bringing business rates levels into line with rental levels, and that's already within their power to do that through the rateable multiplier. So they can adjust the multiplier to reflect the circumstances around rental levels and rateable levels. I think what the report should have said is, as Simon alluded to, the whole business rate system itself needs to be looked at, because it's clearly not fit for purpose any longer, in my opinion, particularly regarding online retailers, as Simon alluded to. So yes, I agree, but I don't think the report reflects it properly, to be honest. With regards to the smaller town centres, Councillor Hunt, we are, as we speak, employing the consultants, the urbanists, to look at a strategy for what we regard as our secondary and tertiary town centres. So that will include areas like Ystalyfera, Gwerford, and so on. So that matter is in hand. With the report, I think I would like to draw attention to page 53. There's a league table there of councils and the amount of funding that we draw down from the Welsh Government for town centre regeneration. And I just wanted to point out that Neath Talbot is number 3 in the league table, only behind Swansea and Newport, which are obviously big city centres. So I think as a council, we're certainly punching above our weight when it comes to town centre regeneration.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Nigel, did you want to come back briefly? You're on mute, Nigel.
I did notice that table, and I was really pleased to see where we stood in it, and that is testament to the team that we've got. I would like to see capacity improved in your team. I've said this many times. I think that it's a false economy to keep it small. I think the benefits we get of a bigger regeneration team is we should be exploring that. It's just on the multi-storey car park, that's all. Is it possible we can have an audit on the multi-storey and see the defects? Because people are, you know, raising this with me, and going forward, would we be able to look at a multi-storey? But is that okay? Somebody could tell me something about that.
I think that's something that's already been looked at, if I'm honest. As ever with all of our buildings, you know, there's a sort of an ongoing maintenance regime. Could we spend more on buildings? Yeah, it'd be great if we could, but it's managing it within the existing budgets. But it's definitely something that's being looked at.
Okay, Nigel, brilliant.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Simon.
No worries. Thank you, Nigel, for your very important questions. Councillor Jamie Evans, then, please.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Yeah, it's just picking up on a couple of points that have already been made by Nigel before me. In regards to the free Wi-Fi, it was brought up in and digital connectivity, and that it was brought up in a Neath Town Council meeting last night. The police are raising concerns that actually being well connected is causing antisocial behaviour around Angel Square in Neath. Now, I've been lucky enough to travel all across Europe, and many of the major cities, Budapest, Copenhagen, Munich, Cologne, they're all extremely well connected digitally. You get free Wi-Fi almost everywhere you go. And they don't seem to have the problems that we do. Granted, I've mainly been sticking to, like more well-known areas, but, Angel Square is a very prominent location in Neath. If we do plan on making sure our communities and towns are connected digitally and everyone can get online everywhere, what plans are in place to ensure that we don't have large groups loitering, intimidating shoppers, pensioners, families going about their business, and making town centres unpleasant to visit. And then in terms of the regeneration side of things, again, I agree with Nigel. I think it's a case of speculate to accumulate in terms of enlarging the team. I'd love to see. And mentioned town centres aren't just about retail. We saw, well, it's going back about 15 years now or more, the plans for Neath Town Centre, and while I appreciate and I'm supportive of the new leisure centre, there was plans for a rugby museum in the shape of a ball. Neath disputed with Lampeter as the home of rugby in Wales. I think there's a lot, and granted we're not at our peak at the minute. We have fallen slightly from grace in the last 15 years, but we're on our way back up now, hopefully. I think that there's more that can be done around the cultures of Neath, Talbot, Pontedawe. We've got the Art Centre, which is fantastic in Ponte. The Plaza is a really good development. But I'd like to see, and it would involve Neath Rugby Club as well. Something like we're seeing in Wrexham now, where we've got a National Football Museum proposed by the Welsh Government, Wrexham County Council, Wrexham Football Club and the FAW, working together to create that National Football Museum. And I know we might have competition from Lampeter, who claim to be the first team in Wales for rugby, but I think it's something that we really need to celebrate in Neath, personally. Diolch.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jimmy. I do appreciate it is Regeneration Town Centre, so they're all valid questions, but we did move into community safety and public protection. But however, officers, I'm happy for you to answer whatever you feel necessary to all of Jamie's questions, or pass them on if you feel you're not in a position to officers that can. So over to you first then, Simon.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I mean, as members may be aware, obviously the council is looking at developing its cultural heritage strategy. So some of the items that Councillor Evans mentioned will be picked up in that. I think it will include an understanding of the sporting heritage as well as sort of the cultural heritage. In terms of the digital and the potential for antisocial behaviour. As you may know, there's a Neath Town Centre partnership, as there is one in Port Talbot now as well, which also looks at those issues to see whether there are ongoing problems. The police are represented there as well to try and reduce any incidences within town centres. There is potential, I suppose, for young people to congregate if they think they can get onto free Wi-Fi, etc. And we'll just have to manage that as we go. I mean, maybe these things could be switched on and off, for example, and it may be that it's on during certain times and not others. But I think it's just something that we'll have to manage in conjunction with our teams. And obviously, we've beefed up the sector within the town centres. Joe now has 2 assistants who work within the town centres with us to give us a bit more information about what's going on. But also our links with the police are much better now as well.
Thank you for that, Simon. Claire, did you want to come in on the antisocial question from Jamie? I think you're in a more of appropriate position to answer it if you wanted to, Claire.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, we have had incidents of antisocial behaviour in the town centres, and the community safety team, on behalf of the Community Safety Partnership, has called together various partnership meetings to take a partnership and solution focused approach to addressing the issues, some of which has included things like the substance misuse outreach workers, has included more work to promote the use of the radios and things like that. So, and also to highlight the positives of the town centre, and to encourage and work closely with South Wales Police, who lead in terms of enforcement activity. So there has been an awful lot of activity in these areas, really strong partnership solution focused work to address the issues. I know I can see Councillor Leanne Jones would probably want to comment as well, but obviously if councillors have any concerns, they're very welcome to contact myself or Eleanor, and we're happy to discuss them in more detail.
Thank you, Claire. Jamie, are you happy with the responses? Yeah, I won't bring the cabinet member in at this point. I'll go to other members first, just in case she can pick up on some of the points they may raise then as well, so that she can cover it all rather than back and forth. So I'll go to who's next indicated, and that's Councillor Sheila Penry, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Evans covered quite a bit, but I do sit on the Neath Partnership. We had a meeting this week, and the police have said they have got a meeting now. I think the deputy leader could give you more information on this, with Morrison supermarket, to see if anything can be done on the Wi-Fi, because we are having terrible trouble with antisocial behaviour there. So they are looking in which way they can negotiate now with Safeway to try and stop the antisocial. Carrying on about the museum, yes, I'm a big sports myself, but Simon, you know I've been on about this for about 10, 12 years, to have a museum, if it's possible, in Neath, because all the historic, we are in the not antiquarians, in the archives, the people in Neath, and even the schools in Neath, are asking, why can't we have a museum? Because this would be great education for the children, because when St. Thomas had they had something on in the years last year, 2 years ago, they brought most of it out into the town hall, and some of the children couldn't get over the historic that we are hiding away. So Simon, if we could only get the museum, even for education, that would be great helpful for us in Neath.
Thank you, Sheila. I'll continue to go to members now, and then I'll go to the cabinet, and if officers want to come back on any of the points, they could just indicate, and I'll come to you then. So I'll go to the next indicator, and that was Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Thanks, Chair. No, I was just interested that Jamie mentioned about the issues around Wi-Fi in Neath, and perhaps what's been suggested from the police. I had a similar discussion with the police recently about premises in my ward with Wi-Fi and people congregating outside. But I think the sort of idea of maybe switching it off is not not really the right way to go. I think it really shows, doesn't it, that if for example in the town centre we had better Wi-Fi coverage, we're not going to get congregations in very specific hotspots. So I think obviously the long-term solution here is to improve the connectivity generally, isn't it? And I think we've got to be careful, particularly from the police point of view, to not let them push us down a line of encouraging businesses to reduce the connectivity available to the public, because it's a really easy solution, and it's what was suggested to me in my word, oh, we'll get the shop to turn it off. And I thought, well, okay, but that's a very short-term, maybe short-sighted way of dealing with the problem. And I think the answer is let's get everywhere connected so that people don't have to gather. And I'm sure, you know, colleagues would agree with that particular point. But I just thought it was interesting.
Sheila, don't interrupt. Sheila, wait.
Just on this, in the partnership, they are looking for Morrison's to put like a code for the Wi-Fi that people can pick up the code from them in Morrison's, and that could alleviate the antisocial.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sheila. Sean, I don't know if you've finished.
No, I just had just another little brief point to make, but no, I think, but that's where I think we need to go with this generally. But I was interested in that. For me, it was an urban location, not necessarily a town centre location where we had the issue. So I think we have got to consider what the impacts of this sort of patchy connectivity is. And I hadn't joined connectivity with antisocial behaviour until I had that phone call last week, and we've had this discussion today. So I think it's a really interesting, perhaps more, you know, a new point for us to pick up in our other committee as well. And the only other thing I wanted to just quickly say was around obviously the cultural sort of spaces and everything else. You know, I've got to agree with other members on that. I think it is where we need to go with town centres. And I just wanted to just say to Sheila, I had the opportunity of coming across some of the Neath Museum stores a few years ago myself, and yeah, there's quite a lot of interesting things in there, so it would be nice to get those out in the community at some point. Thanks, Chair.
No worries, Sean. Thank you for that. And before I go to the cabinet member, now I'll go finally to Councillor Nigel Hunt, then, please.
Thank you, Steve. I'll try to be brief. As a member for Aberafan and as someone on Boxing Day who would be wearing the blood and black, I have to say the thought of a rugby museum in Neath is fantastic. It has such a great tradition of rugby. It's known as a rugby town. It's got great history and tradition. It would bring footfall and tourism, and would not only be benefit Neath, it would benefit the whole of the county. And I just think that's a wonderful idea. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Nigel. And before I go to Leanne, then, Sean, is that legacy on now, or did you want to come back again?
Legacy on, sorry, Chair.
Lovely. There we are then. Thank you for being patient, Leanne. Over to you now then. Thank you.
Oh, I have a lot of patience, Councillor Hunt. Just to concur really with what Claire has said, and Councillor Hunt, you will be aware that we've dealt with this in the Community Safety Partnership on a number of times. Antisocial behaviour across Neath, Talbot and Pontydewi has been an issue, and over the past 2 years we have been doing a lot to address some of the issues that you've mentioned. We have regular multi-agency meetings and have put measures in place to deal with issues speedily. The police are currently carrying out increased patrols in the town centre, and I think really for the first time in the last year or so we've had 2 new inspectors in Neath and Talbot, both females, and they've done a sterling job. I've had regular meetings with them on the town centres, and we've actually stopped those meetings now because we feel we're at a point where the partnership working between everybody is superb. But we've also got to recognise as well, like education, environment and housing all help to improve community safety, and local councils have the statutory duty, which the Community Safety Partnership, and we've got the long-standing board, which includes the Council, Police, Fire and Rescue. So I think I just wanted to say, not to go on too much, that we're fully aware of some of the issues in the town centre, and obviously we'll have the summer months coming ahead now, but I've got full faith in the police and our community safety team in all areas that the partnership work will continue, and we'll make sure that our towns are a safe and vibrant place to visit.
Thank you for that, Leanne, and you're quite right. I can concur that an awful lot of work is going on, and it's not easy. different things change all the time, certainly with antisocial behaviour. And as we move forward, like I said, who would have thought the hotspots with technology, when people find a place to congregate, would be something that we'll be talking about in this meeting. But an awful lot of good work. Obviously, more needs to be done, and I'm sure that will be the drive and determination for any new administration in this authority going forward, because antisocial behaviour needs to be one of the top priorities right across Neath and Talbot, and I'm sure everybody would agree with that. Before I leave this item, Councillor Simon Noyle put in the chat for Andrew or Simon, in relationship, the question wasn't answered where the 8 towns were. Can you, either of you, give what the 8 towns are?
Well, I have a guess, Councillor Hunt. Obviously, we've got the 3 main towns, Neath, Talbot, Pontardawe. Then if you look at who's got a town council, that brings in Britain Ferry and Glynny, so that's 5. It does say that it's communities with 2,000 residents or more, so I'm guessing the other 3 would be places like Skewing, Talbot or Ystalyfera. But we can check on that if you like.
There we are. Simon, did you want to come in on that, or are you happy with that response?
No, we'll give them a confirmed list, Chair.
Well, and Councillor Noyle, you happy? He's still here, yeah. Oh yeah, thumbs up. So before I do leave this item, as I previously mentioned, this report is for information again and to note. But Andrew brought up a few points of a little bit of irregularities and comments. And while it's a report for noting, I just wanted to check, Chloe. Yes, we can support the report, but if there's something in that report that is inaccurate for accuracy, does that need to be looked at and amended, or not? I just want to question that.
The report is in respect of 2 specific recommendations within the overall document, Councillor, which we're not querying. I only raised an issue in regards to business rates, but that isn't contained within the 2 recommendations that you're asked to consider, so it shouldn't prevent you from accepting those recommendations.
Well, there we are. That's why Chloe was asking you. This report is for noting.
Yeah, it's for information purposes, Chair, but on page 169, you can see that is for Cabinet to note the actions contained within Appendix 2.
Right.
But they'll just be noting it as well, so it's fine.
Well, there we are. That's all I wanted to clarify, to make sure we're doing it properly. So thank you for that. Okay, then. That will take us on to urgent items. Item 5, and as you were aware, we only scrutinising one of the urgent items today, and that's the Hackney carriage fare increase, and it's a decision item. So Neil is here for this, of course. Neil, have you got anything to add for this item before I open it up to questions? Thank you.
No, thanks, Chair. I think the report covers everything, so I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, I agree. It is self-explanatory. Saif, you indicated pre-briefing you want to ask a question on this report, please.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a beautiful child.
I know, I'm babysitting. Chair, I'm going to be very quick. Just wanted to ask, how does the proposed tariff compare to our neighbouring surrounding authorities, and also has the increased cost of living and the inflation we've seen increase over the last year or so been factored into this at all?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. In relation to your first question on the comparison, you've got to be a little bit careful when you're comparing tariffs across with other authorities, simply because you have different starting rates and you have different rates at which they increase. Having said that, there is a magazine that publishes tariffs on sort of a quarterly basis, and they compare tariffs on a 2-mile trip on a daytime tariff, so tariff 1. And I'll just quickly give you some comparisons. So out of 359 councils across England and Wales, Neath Talbot is currently 283rd place, with the highest being at number 1. So relatively close to the bottom in Neath Talbot. In Wales, out of the 22 authorities, we are 18th, and we have a 2-mile tariff 1 cost of £5.46 currently, and that compares locally with Powys, who's £5.40, they're the lowest, Merthyr £5.50, Swansea £5.70, Regen £5.80, and Carmarthenshire £6.20. So as you can see, we're compared to our neighbouring authorities, we're to the bottom end again. When we do this proposal, that's going to take our 2-mile journey up to £5.80, and that'll bring us in line with Bridgend and above Swansea. However, Bridgend and Swansea last did their increase in 2018, so they're all going to be due an increase. It just so happens that we're probably one of the first to get in this year, so we'll jump above them for a short period of time, and at which point then they'll catch us up when they do their increase. And then just moving on to your second question, Councillor, the cost of it, but yes, of course, the cost of living is why we increase the tariffs. So we last increased ours in 2019, and at the time I spoke with the various trade organisations in the Hackney Carriage Trade in Neath Talbot, and I said, look, what we really need to be doing is reviewing this tariff on an annual basis, the same as you do with buses and trains. And it just so happened we did it 2019, 2020 came along, and we went straight into the pandemic. 21 we didn't do it. They didn't want it anyway during that period. So this is the first real opportunity now we've had to look at increasing this tariff to cover the cost of living over the last sort of 3 years or so. The intention was that I would bring a report. I met with the trade associations just a few weeks ago, and my intention was to bring a report to members in the summertime. And then everything happened in Europe, the disruption we're seeing now with sort of oil supplies and things, and the prices of petrol have gone through the roof. So it became urgent to get this tariff increase through. We're having a lot of pressure from the trade saying that they're struggling. It's important to note that the increase that we're looking at was the same increase that I would have brought to you in June. It just happens that because of the situation now across Europe, that petrol prices are going up, and it's expedited the need to get the increase in place.
Saith, before I allow you to come back, Chloe, I've had a message pop up on my screen saying the time of this meeting is going to finish in 3 minutes.
Ignore that, Chair. It's just because that's the time that was allocated in the Teams
right,
invite.
yeah.
It carries on, though.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't want us to just have a blank screen, and so, right, sorry, thank you for that. Neil, thank you for that. Saith, back to you. Are you happy with that response?
Yes, I'm happy with the response from Neil, Chair. I welcome the decision that this is going to be reviewed on an annual basis going forward. And I think that's a very wise move, especially with everything that's going on. And also thanks to Neil for bringing this tariff proposal earlier than anticipated. So just want to thank the team for that. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. Anybody else got anything on this item? No? Chloe, why I mentioned that is Zoom. If you schedule times in Zoom, you do actually go off. So I just wanted to highlight it. So right, Councillor Percy, before I go to the recommendation, back to you.
Oh no, apologies, Chair. I just wanted, just in terms of the next item, I just wanted to say that in terms of the time getting on a little bit, I was quite happy to pick up my question with officers outside the meeting, but I'm not sure if Councillor Hunt wanted to ask a question on it or not. Just wanted to flag that up with you, Chair.
Oh, that's kind of you. So Nigel, can I just go to Nigel? Well, no, let me deal with this item first. Sorry, I do apologise. As you can see,
ask a question later.
I'll come to you now, Nigel. 1 sec. Let's deal with this Hackney College fare increase. So the recommendations are on page 6. They are 2 separate recommendations, and again, I will take them in their entirety. So can I have a proposer and seconder, please?
I propose, Chair.
Excellent, seconder.
I'll second, Chair.
There, that's wonderful. So can everybody be happy with the recommendation to go to Cabinet? Yeah, I see no indication, so that'll go in to Cabinet as proposer second. Okay, yeah, right, Nigel. Before I go into the last item, which is the private item, which I'd have to read out the paragraph, Sean has indicated he's happy to pick up his question outside of the meeting. So you wanted to ask a question as well. Are you happy to do likewise?
Yes.
Or, yes?
Yes.
Therefore, Chloe, I will not need to scrutinise that particular item. Is that correct?
No, yeah, that's right, Chair. So you've dealt with the urgent item, you've chosen to scrutinise. So all that's left on the agenda now is to close the meeting.
Yes, okay, but I am going to hold you up just for a couple of moments before I close the meeting. I just want to say briefly as I can possibly say, because I'm not very good with brief ways. Can I just thank, firstly, all the committee that have, this is our last Regeneration Development Committee. So can I thank everybody, members of this committee who have taken part, not just today, but over the years since I've been the chair. You've been absolutely brilliant. There's been no politics as such in this meeting, which is right. Scrutiny committees are not for politics, and it's been conducted absolutely fantastically. You've raised some brilliant questions. I know there's a number of you in this meeting today, or who have left already perhaps, who may not be coming back to council because you've made that decision. I want to wish you all the very best in whatever you do with your lives going forward, and it's been a pleasure and an honour to have worked with you to put the scrutiny questions to officers as we have. I want to thank all the officers as well, those that are not here. I want Simon and his team and Nicola and everybody else to take back to your staff for the excellent way you've responded and dealt with scrutiny. It goes without saying, and that's, I would be biased, but I think Neath Talbot has got the best scrutiny processes in the whole of Wales. And I know that's the case for a number of councils that I've watched scrutiny work, and I do think ours is the very, very best. I want to personally thank Rachel Taylor, my vice chair, who I know is not coming back, and I want to wish her all the best with whatever she chooses to do. She had to step in on a number of occasions to bail me out and to take the meetings. And now she's put up with me. I don't know either. So thanks to Rachel for that. And as I said, everybody, cabinet members, anybody who's been involved in this scrutiny committee, I want you to thank everybody in officers and everywhere else. I think it's been an amazing privilege. And I think I said at the beginning of the meeting, this particular regen is always the good news stories, mainly across the borough. So I'm so pleased to be on this one. But I really mean it from the bottom of my heart, irrespective of who's back next year or what the makeup is of this committee. I'm sure whoever it will be will go a long way to making it as good as it's been, certainly in my time. And Chloe, finally, you. Without you, I would have been lost, and your colleagues who have stepped in. You manage, so Democratic Services, make sure they all know there, you manage us in a way that the meetings can run as smoothly as possible. And that's not always the case, but I really personally, you've been my right-hand lady in all of this, and your predecessors and so forth. So I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. No politics. I think you're all done amazing jobs in scrutinising officers. And if you're here or not here, best of luck to whatever you're going to be doing. So those are just a few short words from me, as I said before I close the meeting. But I have noticed Cabinet Member Annette Wingrave would like to say a few words as well. So over to you, Annette. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go through what you went through, but I will say a huge thank you to everybody involved on this committee. But I'm going to thank you, Chair, because you've thanked everybody else, and I think it's only we thank you for the work that you've done since you've been the Chair. And I'm sure we have kept politics out of it as much as we can. I know sometimes it does breach over, but we've done a very good job. Thank you all.
Oh, thanks, Annette. There we are. That only remains. Annette's legacy. That only remains for me to thank you for this morning's work and wish you all the very best and have a lovely week.